Imagine you're a fish who has spent its entire life navigating the deep ocean, dodging predators and finding food thousands of feet below the surface where no light ever reaches. Then one day, you're gliding across the seafloor and you cross an invisible line in the water. There's no wall, no warning signal, no change in temperature that your body can detect in time. Just a line. And the moment you cross it, your gills stop pulling oxygen. Your cells start shriveling from the inside out as salt floods through them. Your nervous system shuts down like someone yanked a power cord from the wall. You sink to the bottom and you join a ring of corpses preserved at the edge of this thing for centuries. Crystallized in salt, frozen there like nature decided to build its own museum of death. And the thing that killed you isn't a predator or some deep-sea monster. It isn't even alive. It's a lake. A separate lake inside the ocean with a boundary you can physically break through like punching through a wall of water. These are called brine pools. So how does a pool of water turn into an instant kill zone? And what is actually happening inside the bodies of the animals that fall in? The worst one we have ever found sits about 3,300 feet beneath the Gulf of Mexico. And scientists, in their infinite creativity, decided to name it the hot tub of despair. And look, that name sounds like something a sleep-deprived college student scrawled on their dorm room jacuzzi after a bad semester. But it is the most accurate thing anyone has ever called a body of water. It is roughly 100 feet around and about 12 feet deep. So small you could walk its perimeter in a minute, and it clocks in at around 14% salt. The ocean you go on vacation to swim in sits at about 3.5% salinity. So this thing is roughly 4 times saltier than the water around it, which is enough to put it in a different category of saltiness that your body would not survive long enough to fully appreciate. So who would actually win in a fight against it? Forget sharks. Forget anything you would normally call tough. The real contender here is the Pompeii worm. Pompeii worms live on the walls of hydrothermal vents in water that hits 175 degrees Fahrenheit. They tolerate toxic metals and acidic chemistry that would kill almost anything else on the planet. And a lot of scientists call them the most extreme animal ever discovered. If anything alive has a shot at crossing into a brine pool and walking back out, it is this thing. The Pompeii worm would likely still die. Not because of the heat or chemistry, but because nothing it has evolved actually helps with the one thing the brine pool does. The salt does not care how heat-resistant you are. The lack of oxygen does not care how tough your shell is. The Pompeii worm crosses that boundary, and the same thing that drops a fish in seconds would drop the toughest animal we have ever found in roughly the same amount of time. The hot tub of despair kills almost everything that has ever crossed it, which is a statistic almost nothing else on this planet can claim. And we are not exaggerating about the corpses. The footage from the submersible that first reached it shows a ring of dead fish, crabs and isopods lying around its shoreline, motionless, looking like they fell asleep mid-swim. The hot tub of despair killed them all so fast, none of them even got to react. So what is actually inside that water that does this? The answer is honestly stranger than you would expect. The answer is salt, not a poison, not some exotic deep-sea toxin. Just salt, in concentrations so extreme that the water itself behaves like a different substance entirely. Here is the principle. The brine inside the pool is so dense with salt that it cannot mix with the normal seawater above it. The same way oil and water sit in a glass without combining, the brine just sinks and stays put, no matter how long you leave it. It is water that broke the rules of being water. And once you understand that one thing, everything else about the kill zone falls into place. Because the brine never mixes, oxygen from above cannot get in either, which means the inside of the pool has almost zero oxygen. So a fish crossing that boundary is suddenly trying to breathe water that has nothing breathable in it. Its brain shuts down through a process called cerebral hypoxia. which is just a clinical way of saying the most important organ in its body starts suffocating while the rest of it is still technically moving. That same salt concentration also triggers osmosis across every cell membrane in the animal's body, pulling water out of its own tissues faster than its biology can respond to. So the creature is dehydrating at a cellular level while being completely surrounded by liquid, which is honestly one of the more cruel ironies nature has ever come up with. One rule: salt too dense to mix. Everything else is just the consequences of that rule playing out on whatever is unlucky enough to cross the line. But the hot tub of despair is not the only one of these out there. It is not even the strangest. In the Mediterranean Sea, a research team scanning the floor thought their instruments were picking up the metal hull of a sunken ship. The readings were dense and heavy, exactly what you would expect from wreckage. When they sent their camera down to get a closer look, there was no ship. There was a lake. The Bannock Basin is just sitting there in the dark, one of the most studied brine pools in the eastern Mediterranean, with its own crystallized shoreline and its own perimeter of bodies that never moved again after they touched the water. The formation story for this one goes back roughly 6 million years, when the entire Mediterranean Sea dried up almost completely, leaving behind salt deposits up to a mile or more thick in places. When the water came back, those buried salt sheets started bleeding brine into any depression they could find. Bannock is the result. Now, take a look at this one. The Atlantis II, deep in the Red Sea, threw researchers off when they first reached it. Most brine pools are cold and still. This one was hot. The water inside it was nearly 155 degrees Fahrenheit, superheated by volcanic activity underneath the sea floor, where tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart. When the first instruments went in, the team genuinely thought their equipment was malfunctioning because nothing about those readings made sense for something sitting at the bottom of the ocean. A scalding lake of poison at the bottom of the Red Sea, fed by magma chambers saturated with toxic metals like iron and zinc that would corrode most things they touched. But here is the weirdest part. In the polar regions, brine pools form in a way that has no equivalent in warmer oceans. As seawater freezes into ice, the salt inside it gets physically ejected because salt molecules cannot fit into ice crystal structures. That expelled brine becomes so cold and so dense that it sinks straight down toward the sea floor, freezing the seawater around it on the way down and pooling at the bottom, where it becomes anoxic within weeks. When researchers first captured footage of this process happening in Antarctica, the descending brine looked almost alive. It was moving, shifting, creeping across the seafloor like a slow-motion finger of death, freezing every creature it touched as it advanced. That footage is one of the most unsettling things ever filmed underwater, and it was a brine pool being born in real time. So, 3 completely different processes, 3 different corners of the planet, and somehow they all arrive at the same result: a lake inside the ocean that kills nearly everything that touches it. Which raises an obvious question. If these things are this lethal, what actually happens to the bodies? You would think that dying in the ocean would at least come with the dignity of a normal decomposition, where your body breaks down, gets eaten by something, and rejoins the food chain like nature intended. But brine pools do not work like that. The animals that die here get preserved, not buried, not eaten, not scattered by currents, just preserved at the edge of the pool, exactly as they were in the moment they died, sometimes for centuries. It is essentially nature running its own taxidermy operation at the bottom of the ocean, except nobody asked for it and nothing benefits from it. Over time, salt crystals work their way inward, physically penetrating into the tissue itself and replacing the moisture inside with solid mineral deposits. Parts of the animal become partially mineralized, not quite stone, but not quite flesh either. Somewhere in between, in a way that has no good comparison in normal life. But here is where the story flips on itself, because right at the boundary of the pool, That razor-thin line where normal seawater hovers directly above the brine without mixing into it, something genuinely incredible is happening. Life, not just a little bit of it either. These organisms are called extremophiles, and they have essentially rewritten the rules of biology to make themselves at home in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. Most of them are bacteria and archaea that have ditched the normal playbook entirely. Instead of relying on sunlight and oxygen for energy, they run on chemical reactions, putting energy from sulfur compounds and methane in a process that is basically photosynthesis, except the sun gets replaced with toxic fumes, which is not an upgrade most organisms would voluntarily choose. They form thick white mats along the edges of brine pools that look like fuzzy carpets, marking the exact line between survivable ocean and liquid death. And around those mats, a small ecosystem quietly assembles itself. Tiny crustaceans and polychaete worms feed along the edges. Tubeworms anchor themselves nearby and survive entirely on the microbes living inside a special internal organ. Tubeworms famously have no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system of any kind, which sounds like an enormous design flaw until you realize they have been outlasting most other animals on Earth for millions of years. None of these creatures go into the pool, none of them are trying to. They have found the one address in the neighborhood where the rent is free precisely because everyone else is too afraid to live there. And they have made it work. But here is what makes scientists excited about all of this, and it has nothing to do with the worms. There are oceans on other moons. Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus are both believed to have vast liquid oceans beneath thick shells of ice. And those oceans are almost certainly cold, dark, oxygen poor, and heavily saturated with salts and chemicals. Crushing pressure, complete absence of light, extreme chemical toxicity. Conditions that are not just extreme by Earth standards, but almost identical to what is sitting at the bottom of our own ocean right now, inside a brine pool. Sound familiar? If microbial life has figured out how to not just survive, but build entire ecosystems at the edge of something as brutal as the hot tub of despair, then the argument that nothing could possibly be alive in the oceans of Europa becomes a lot harder to make. Brine pools are not proof of alien life, but they are the strongest natural argument we have that life does not need comfortable conditions to exist, just the right chemistry and enough time. And there is one more thing worth sitting with. Less than a third of the ocean floor has been properly mapped, which means there are almost certainly more of these pools sitting down there right now that nobody has ever seen, with their own rings of preserved bodies and their own boundaries that have never been crossed by a camera. Every one of them is a closed laboratory running an experiment we have not figured out how to read yet. So the next time someone tells you the ocean is just water, remind them there is a lake inside it, ringed by corpses that have not decayed in centuries. And in the next video, we take a hard look at what animals live in each section of the ocean. The ocean's 5 deadly layers and the animals who live there is on the screen now. If you enjoyed this video, please like. It really helps the channel and we appreciate it. And subscribe for more Below the Blue. See you in the deep.